COVID.
So
not the best way. Not the best way to start, but like to be fair, I was gonna rant about it in the half hour beforehand, but I need to talk with the like health officials or whatever, because more than one person knows I have COVID, because information gets spread around. So about like quarantine information and asking me how my health was, and I've only experienced occasional diarrhea, so hopefully it just is that. But that being said, Christy, how are you doing?
What an intro.
Well, the same on the symptoms, but I don't have COVID. Yeah, I had it already.
I mean, to be fair,
Oh,
I've had diarrhea from like accidentally not eating enough or like weird stuff like that, so it's just like
And I've been sick the last few weeks, as you well know, so I'm better now.
Okay.
I'm eating again, which is nice.
Wait, COVID isn't transferred online, is it?
Oh, dang it.
Didn't you read the news? Did you see?
It's now broken the meat barrier.
Yes.
Oh,
No, I
It's
had
telecommunicable.
I had it early on, so before I knew to be scared of it. So
yeah.
It's only as scared of you as you are of it. So
Exactly. Perfect. How are you doing?
Well, I seem to be relatively free of the signs of COVID. So I get to brag about that, I guess.
Well, that's good. I mean, admittedly, I'm relatively free of the signs of COVID, which is a good thing, at least at the moment. But yeah.
And he, him pronouns.
right, she, her. I forgot.
Jessie, you're guest co-hosting, and how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Again, I guess I can brag about being COVID as well, as far as I know, being COVID free. But yeah, I'm just in the middle of packing my apartment. You can't really see in my shot right here, other than the boxes there and the empty shelf. But my apartment's kind of a mess because I'm moving to Seattle in like a week, so that'll be a fun thing to coordinate that I'm currently in the midst of. So other than that, I'm doing all right. So, and she, her, they, them pronouns, and if you're in a pinch, he, him. I don't mind at all.
And finally, we have a relatively well-known guest, certainly more well-known than us, Steve Shives. How are you doing?
Never heard
I'm
of him.
relatively is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that introduction. Hi everybody, I'm Steve, he, him, and I don't have COVID, but I also don't have much of an opening line, so I kind of wish that I had it, so I could. I could also be like, I've got it too, but I don't. So,
you know what? I think not having COVID is better than having COVID as an opening line.
I don't have COVID. But Perfict and Jessie stole that one already, so I can't use it.
Yeah, I know. See,
Yeah.
Done. I'm just retreading their shit. I can't. I do that on YouTube. I shouldn't do that on your channel.
that's fine. I've stolen from you. You've stolen from me.
Yeah, always ripping me off.
Everyone's stolen from each other. So, as for topics, I figured a good thing to start out with, or just whatever, politics and reputation, because it was interesting to me, and because I want to talk with you, Steve Shives, at the very least about it and your thoughts, because you have a reputation. I don't know what it is because I didn't pay much attention to the internet for a while.
Well, I'm not sure what it is either then, if you don't. It really depends on who you talk to.
That's also true. That is definitely true. But like, in general, people seem to gain reputations of, oh no, we lost Perfict. Perfict's having the internet curse. Hopefully it wasn't COVID.
It's internet COVID.
Oh no, not the
Oh,
internet
God,
COVID.
no.
So, um, so sometimes people seem to have political reputations that stick with them for some reason or another, and it almost doesn't seem to matter what they do afterwards. I don't know. Anyone can talk about this. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it is just like it's whatever you're doing or whatever you're known for when people imprint on you is I think a lot of it. Because I know, like, in my case, a lot of people who got to know with people that maybe I don't have the best reputation with, or people who think that I'm an asshole or something, no matter, like, they imprinted on me, and they decided that they knew who I was based on stuff that other people said about me, or based on, like, clips of my videos that were played out of context and other people's stuff or whatever. And they just sort of closed on, okay, that's Steve, that's who he is. And once you close on that, I think it's hard, to change your mind about it. And that's not necessarily an excuse, cause you can still come to an unfair conclusion about somebody, and you should be open to changing it. But I think that's part of what it is. Like, I'm just realizing now in the fifth or sixth sentence of this ramble that it's a long-winded way of saying that, first impressions are really important.
Yeah, no, I suppose I can I can see that. Did either of you have any other thoughts about it? About the potential causes, or?
Yeah, and I mean, I also, like, I would echo Steve. Like, that makes a lot of sense, and I definitely see that. And I also feel like, for me, I can't speak for Steve, but for me, I feel like you do start to play into it a little bit if it's something that you kind of like. For me, like, my channel is much smaller than Steve's, but I know from, like, reading comments or reading things that people see in my channel that one of the things they really like about what I do is trying to be, like, very empathetic and being very, like, sometimes too empathetic and too overly maybe the wrong word, but, like, trying to see things from the other point of view. And that has influenced me to always try and, like, whenever I write something or create something, to try and think about that point and be like, all right, how am I able to try and see the other point of view? So basically the reputation that I've garnered and kind of am somewhat okay with that is sort of started influencing how I react and craft the content that I make. And so it sort of starts becoming a self-fulfilling loop that sort of, like, I start doing that more, so more people react to it. It starts feeding that more. I start reacting to it, which I think is just a sort of an interesting thing that can happen.
Christy, do you have any?
Well, a couple of things. Just for Steve's reputation, or in general?
I've spent the whole show
general.
talking about my reputation.
No, I mean, this isn't
It's-
just about your reputation, Steve, especially because I don't know it that well. I just know that one of my roommates had a negative reputation of you, but that was because they went from more when conservative stuff was more centrist type attitude stuff, and then, like, moved away from that. Probably partially because of being friends with me, I assume.
Well, other than you didn't tell me what the topic was going to be, but funnily enough, Reputation by Jewel has been running through my head all day. So.
I psychically influenced you.
Yes, it was telekinesis or telepathy.
Whatever happens in very early on, when I decided I was going to do the interviews and stuff, I did it out of anger for initially because it was during the ACA gate, or whatever you'd call it. And I had a lot of people telling me, if you have this person on, then we can't be friends anymore. And if you have this person on, so it became sort of a gloppy loop thing. And so I have a reputation of being nice and helpful, but I'm also, you can't tell me who to be friends with. That is a direct no. And I will say something about Steve, which I don't think I've said on air before, which is both he and Christy Winters, who I was a patron of both, but when I came out, my finances collapsed, and both of them insisted on having me on the next show, on the next Patreon hangout anyway, because they're just that cool. So.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I can say something I've never said on this show since we're talking about Steve Shives now. Now this has become the Steve Shives.
I promised we would only talk about me.
You retweeted a video of mine last year, where I was there was a fiasco with Actual Jake, which is the reason why I do not like Actual Jake, and I wouldn't have him on the show. And I know you retweeted, and that's the first time I knew of you. And then I followed you initially, and then I unfollowed you because of the weird reputation thing. And then I realized that was dumb, so I followed you again eventually. But especially when I asked about it, I was just like, I don't know. It's just like a vibes thing at that point.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because like reputation is what follows you even when you're not, like even what people will know about you without actually engaging with you. So it all kind of depends on like what circles of reputation you're in, because like clearly, Steve, you are not very popular among certain groups of people.
Rats.
I know that it must keep you up at night. But then you are also very popular in other circles as well. And so it's just sort of like, who do you encounter first with, or what version of someone's reputation do you encounter first, and from whom are you hearing it? So it's like a game of telephone in a weird way.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of it, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I definitely get that, the telephone game thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's what Jessie just said. Kind of, it reminds me of something that I've said to people before too, which is that, like, especially if you are a content creator in whatever platform is your chosen platform, whether you're making videos or podcasts or blogs or whatever, it's really, really important, I think, that you have in mind, you know, the what audience you're trying to reach.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily mean, and hopefully it doesn't mean that you're pandering to people, because I don't think you should ever pander to people or just tell people what they want to hear so you can attract a given audience. But I think it does matter who you're talking to and who you're trying to talk to. So, I mean, yeah, like what Jessie was saying about how you could have a good reputation with some people and a bad reputation with other people. Depending on the reputation, or depending on the people you have the bad reputation with, that might be completely fine. That might be a sign you're actually doing something right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like in my case, most of the people who I have a bad reputation with, who think that I'm just the shits, are not people that I would want to like me anyway. If I started getting like really, really positive, encouraging comments from that group, I would have to take a step back and go, well, what am I doing wrong?
Mm.
Like, what am I doing that is appealing to them? Because that's definitely not what I'm going for here, you know? So,
if
I mean,
certain groups could get organized, that would be hysterical if they just started messing with you.
but see, you can, but then you can tell though.
So if Sargon and if Sargon and Bering became patrons,
well, that would never happen, because I would refund their money and block them as soon as I realized it was them. which I actually did that. I actually did that to Bering. Bering tried to become a $20 a month patron of mine and commission a custom video from me, and I refunded his money and blocked him because fuck him.
Yeah.
I did not know this.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's almost like some people have ethical views over.
You have ethical standards, Steve?
What? I guess. I don't want to take money from scumbags. Like, is that an ethical standard?
Yeah. So.
Although
Go on.
Sorry. Although generally you've gotten a certain you've managed a certain level of forgiveness. I mean, you and Dusty will never be close. I'm sure you and Fantano, even though he's apologized, will never be like super duper close. Although the song Vadim wrote was pretty funny. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Is it really an ethical standard to say you'd rather tell somebody to piss off than take $20?
Yeah, I guess technically, I guess
I'd rather tell you to piss off than have this $20. So thank you. Piss off.
Well, you could make
I'll pay $20 to say piss off to you.
I'd rather see you choke on this money than take it myself.
Well, see.
Yes.
I mean, I can't guarantee that I have that ethical standard, because for all I know, I would take the $20 and then make a video telling them to piss off.
Thanks for the $20, sucker.
But yeah, so we've definitely talked about a little bit of the negative sides, but what are the sorts of benefits of reputation? Because I get the impression that certain positive reputations genuinely help people out and help people get the ability to reach people as well. And I don't know if there are any other potential benefits that the sorts of first impressions and continual actions get you.
Well, I mean, it helps. It definitely, like in my case, it definitely helps with networking and with meeting other people. You know, I mean, like for like with me and Jessie, like getting to know each other and getting to, you know, collaborate on videos together and stuff like that's been really cool. And I think we are sort of perceived as being part of sort of like the positive side of like the, you know, YouTube Star Trek community, and that's like, so if you have a reputation of that, because you know sometimes reputation is defined by contrasting you with somebody else. You know, like there are so many, like just to talk about, you know, the Star Trek fandom, there are so many YouTube channels that build their content on just being negative and just trashing everything, and not just Star Trek. I mean, there are so many YouTube channels that are devoted to, you know, movie criticism and TV criticism, and all they do is talk about how much everything sucks and how they hate everything. And, you know, and that's sort of unfortunately become a big part of what people perceive as, oh, that's criticism, you know, when you just talk about how much you hate everything. And because Jessie and I and other people that are sort of in our circle don't do that, you know, we get looped together. And it just becomes natural that you want to work together. You know, you start seeing other people share each other's videos and like, oh, that's pretty cool. I wonder if we would get along. I wonder if we could do something together. And so the reputation actually helps you, you know, to find other people, not just fans, not just audience members, but fellow creatives that you can do stuff with and that you can get to know. And that's a really positive thing.
Yeah.
And we appear to have lost Christy now. Apparently the internet demons here. So I'm currently randomly the host now, so I have to actually pay attention to make sure I can get her back on here. No, I've definitely seen that reputation. I think that sort of thing happen in YouTube, and I think the biggest example I can think of to show the contrasting aspects of attitudes is Cinema Sins versus Cinema Wins. Cinema Sins talks about all the bad things in movies. Cinema Wins is like, You know what? Every movie is somebody's favorite. I'm just going to talk about the good thing of movies. Doesn't matter if the person actually likes the movies, just talks about everything good about them. And I know that makes it sound, like I've talked about Cinema Wins more than once, but fuck, I love that channel. Because it's nice to see, it's nice to hear a love of movies.
Yeah, and it also kind of like speaks to reactions against things as opposed to like coming at it from, everything that people do in many ways is like creating something in reaction to or building off of something else. But there's a way to do it. It's like just so directly speaking to something as opposed to like trying to come up with your own stuff, and it sort of naturally contrasts with someone else. So like Cinema Wins and Cinema Sins, they're very much like going at it against each other. Whereas like I feel like Steve and I are both like trying to just be critical in our own specific ways. And because we're doing that, we get lumped into the positive TrekTube community, which I'm glad to be a part of. But then that itself gets contrasted with like the people who just hyper-folicize everything and just hate watch everything. But it's like I've done videos against those people, but I've never tried to be like, oh, let me be the exact antithesis of who they are and be against them. It's just sort of like I'm just being me, and being me somehow gets me lumped in as being opposed to them, which I'm fine with. But it's just sort of an interesting sort of place of like where you're coming from in terms of your reaction and where your content's coming from, whether it's a reaction to something specific or just yourself that somehow naturally contrasts with something else that exists.
I mean, I think the best situation to be in is to earn your reputation based on who you genuinely are.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to do that is to do what I try to do, and I think what you try to do, Jesse, and I think what most people whose work I really like try to do, which is to just do stuff that is honestly important to you, and when you express an opinion or give a critique of something, it's honestly what you think, and you're not calculating it to get a particular response from a particular audience. So that way, if you are sort of perceived as, oh, she's one of the positive ones, okay, great. It's not necessarily, I mean, it's something you may welcome if people say they're like, oh, good, that sounds nice. I like that. But you're not necessarily sitting down going, now I must make another positive video to maintain my positive reputation. It's just your reputation is based on who you actually are, and I think that's really important. And I think that's another thing about the way a lot of people that I don't, that have maybe a bad reputation with me, they do it another way. There's a layer of cynicism and of calculation to what they do, where they're trying to, it's, we use the word grift a lot. They're pulling a grift.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. And this goes back not just to people doing, like fandom menace videos, but also, when I was more active in the atheist community, there were people who, it almost became, it was beside the point whether they actually believed what they were saying or not. It doesn't matter, because people would say like, oh, so-and-so, he makes these videos, but he doesn't really mean it. Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, at a certain point, it's irrelevant whether he means it or not. That's what he's doing in his videos. That's what he's putting out there. That's the audience that he is cultivating as a result. Whether he means it or not is beside the point. But I think it's much better for me to have, a reputation that is based on me actually doing stuff that I am willing to stand behind and that actually represents my honest point of view.
Yeah, like being.
So what you're saying is that reputation should not be based on politics, on doing things for political reasons.
Yeah, or politicking maybe.
Yeah,
because like you can't avoid the stuff that you do having some sort of political angle to it. Because politics in itself is a representation of an ethical viewpoint of the world.
Yeah, but there's governmental politics, but he was talking social politics, where you're doing things to socially manipulate your environment, the world which you're doing it in.
Yeah. I get what you mean. Like focus on that, like in terms of focusing on that over.
Yeah, focus grouping your videos and then tailoring them to. Well, I need to do more positive stuff. That's getting a good response. That kind of thing would be a way of politicking.
Okay.
That's political.
I mean, honestly, like it does. There are times when it does privately. Like I would never, except for what I'm about to do, I would never say this publicly. But like, there are times, except for right now, there are times when like I'll do a video that, like I think should be more popular and it isn't, and I'll kind of grumble about it and go, "Why aren't more people watching this video? It's really good," you know. But it doesn't like I never think like if I do a video that does become super popular, like I never think, oh, I've got to do 10 more of those, like, which I'm grateful for, because I feel like my work would suffer quite a bit if I started approaching it like, oh, they really like that shit, let me do 10 more of those and just really try to wring this dry.
Yeah.
I mean, saying living and dying by the algorithm is not necessarily a great idea.
It's a terrible idea. I think, creatively speaking, it's the worst idea.
No. Like, that's why, because I was kind of given the keys to a lot of the fluid voice stuff, but like, not everyone. Christy got me in contact with you, and I know Christy's gotten a few of the guests, and she also happens to pay for the Zoom thing, so we don't get timed out. But that being said, I know we don't like. I don't get the reasoning behind trying to go too focused. Like, I want to talk with interesting people, and part of my reasoning is, because me and Christy are trans, to humanize the fact that trans people are people. Because I think humanization is the antithesis of hatred.
Yeah, and I like, and it kind of speaks to the same point too, of like, the stuff that I do, like the things I try to make is like, oh, I'm trying to make content that speaks to me and that I'm enthusiastic and like super excited about. And by doing stuff like that, it also humanizes me as a person, because I'm just being authentic. Like, I'm really excited about Star Trek. I'm really excited about Star Trek Enterprise and Captain Archer, and getting freaked out whenever someone mentions Star Trek Enterprise in Lower Deck, And so like that authenticity is like, it enables me to create content that I really love and enables my voice to shine through in the content that I make. But then it also does that added work of what you're talking about, which is humanizing, sadly, a group of people that does not get humanized. Like, it's also like a weird balance too, that when you're part of a marginalized group that you have to walk, because it's like, I'm not here to say I speak for all trans people. My views are my own, and I'm by no means a monolith of the trans community. But because I have a platform that enables me to then the reputation of being like the trans YouTuber, I can be authentic, but also speak for the larger trans experience, but also trying not to overspeak for that experience. If that makes any sense.
That makes total sense, at the very least to me, because I am on trans Twitter, and I hear various types of complaints related to this, but also, I hear a fair amount of what people's opinions are, and obviously everyone's a little bit different. It's part of being human. And which is why I'm like, I'm in a safe place for visibility, to be visible out there. And so that was part of the reason why I tried. The other part relating to honestly, the other part, originally me getting into streaming and stuff, was just I wanted to vent about abuse. That was the original reason, and then I veered far off that topic. But not always.
That trans people are human,
yeah,
and that they don't always represent the overall trans community.
I disagree with some trans people. So.
But it's also like trying to be aware of that too, because it's like, I don't agree with all trans people, but I also have to, like, if I am going to make content that's like, let me talk about the trans experience, I have to try and couch it in like, there's only so much I can speak to, because like there is a reason, like, yes, I'm part of a marginalized group, but I'm also like a white upper middle class, or come from an upper middle class background, and live in a fairly liberal trans affirming places and have lived throughout my whole life. So like there is a reason that like I am able to have a better chance at having a platform than other people like trans women of color who may be coming from lower income places. And so it's like I don't want to represent like that I can speak for every single person in the trans community, and that there are things that I am going to miss because I don't have certain aspects of the trans experience, but also trying to leverage the fact that I am a trans YouTuber to try to point to things that like, look, this is my thoughts on it. Here's some knowledge that I have. Let me pass it off to you and let me point you in this direction that maybe you can see some other people who can give you that knowledge that I don't have.
Yeah. So moving.
Sorry, that got off topic.
Yeah, no, but that's fine. Things get off topic on the show a fair amount, and I'm still don't know what's going on with Christy's internet or whatnot. But so people obviously use reputation as a general measure or whatever. What do you think is like the most annoying aspect of that?
For me, it's when people try to hide behind it when they fuck up, which I can relate to because that's an instinct that I have too. But like, especially because because I am a member of pretty much all the privileged identities. Like other than economic privilege, like I have a decent standard of living. I'm not living in poverty. I'm okay, but I'm not rich or anything like that. But other than that, I'm about as privileged in our society as you can get. And so and because I make an effort to, to have friends from different backgrounds, and because I try to be aware and I try to, talk about issues that are relevant to people unlike me, occasionally I mess up and I talk out of turn or I speak before I should or whatever, and I get tackled by somebody who is like, you shouldn't have said that, or and and it's very, very tempting to be one of those guys that says, oh, you're just taking this all wrong. I'm one of the good ones. You don't have to worry about me. I'm one of the good guys. And that is exactly the wrong response. Like that is the one thing that you just must not do when somebody calls you in on something or calls you out on something and says, hey, you fucked up. You shouldn't have said that. You shouldn't have done that. That's an opportunity for growth and for change and for education, not to dig in your heels and go, but I'm one of the good ones. Don't you know who I am? You should want me to be your friend. You shouldn't be trying to piss me off like that's, and I think a lot of people do that. And I understand it from an emotional perspective because you feel wounded and you get defensive. But if your response when somebody says, what you said in that video or what you said on that show or in that tweet or whatever, like, that was hurtful or that was offensive or that could be harmful to people. Maybe you didn't mean it that way, but et cetera, et cetera. If your response to that is to whip out your credentials and be like, don't you know who I am? That's exactly what you should not do.
I mean,
one of the ones which I have been guilty of is not listening to them enough and going, you should know me well enough that you should give me the charity of reading that isn't how I meant, and so on. And then going, oh, you really do have a complaint with what I actually was saying. It takes a while to drill that in. They actually really had a complaint that really was legitimate, and it was about what I was saying. I'm just assuming their complaint has to be about a misunderstanding of what I said.
Yeah, I mean that's what J.K. Rowling, to use a big example of. That's what she's doing. If we're using like a heightened version of this, like she was told her entire authorial like career that's like, you're one of the good ones. Like, you stand up for you stand up for gay rights. Like, it's okay. Don't listen to the criticism that, you didn't put enough like overt explicit gay Dumbledore in there. It's like, it totally makes sense. Like, we understand you're one of the good ones. And so she kept getting that reinforced to the point now where when, she's being told explicitly, like, no, what you're saying is expressly harmful to the trans community. She's like, no, I'm one of the good ones. Don't you know me? I'm trying to stand up for women's rights. I'm trying to stand up for these things. And so she doesn't view herself, I mean, I don't want to assume too much, but like she's not having that self-awareness of like, no, you're actually doing harm, because she sees herself as like one of the good ones standing up for the right side of history, sort of thing. But it is also on the counterbalance of that, it's also a hard line to walk too, because like I try to do that with the things that I do. I've gotten comments like, I made a joke that was like, I made fun of in one of my videos, earlier videos, which I made a joke about Chitwatel Ejiofor. I made his name's like, oh, his name's really difficult to pronounce, and it was like, that was the joke. And I got messages from people being like, hey, that was kind of offensive, and I know you didn't intend it, but like, to make a joke that you can't pronounce someone's name hurts the people whose names are historically unable to be pronounced by people in our society. And I'm like, oh, I never really thought about that. I need to make sure that that's something that I am aware of and try to be more cognizant of. But then also you can fall into the trap of like, I got a person who like went off on me for like, I liked Birds of Prey. Like, I just liked that movie. And they were very, very upset about the fact that I liked a movie that featured a character who was basically essentially whitewashed and changed. And that's a legitimate criticism. And so I was like trying to listen and be like, no, I totally understand you. So I want to make sure I put that in my video on it. I talk about it. I'm just trying to be self-aware. But then kept coming after me over and over again for like, how dare you even continue to make a thing about it or talk about it or like the movie. And I'm like, I understand there's problems and that I need to acknowledge them and be aware of it, but also I need to also kind of talk about this thing too that's also a part of it. It's not wholly bad or wholly good. I don't know if I'm making my point clear, but
yeah, no, I kind of understand what you mean. It's one of those things where you have to listen and think about it, because some people make unreasonable demands, some people make reasonable demands, some people and just about everything out there isn't going to be perfect, and people are going to it's the balance of what is a fuck up, where is your line of this is unconscionable. I don't even want to, even if I like the movie, I don't want to provide it any support ever. Or, there's everyone's a little bit different with that. And I think some of the problem comes in when people expect others to have the line in the same place as them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think the most important thing is to just have a level of awareness.
Yeah.
I mean, because like I know that there are, especially now that I have a lot of friends who politically are a lot further to the left than I am. There are things that I like that they find problematic, and that when they point out the problems to me, I can recognize that and go, yeah, I totally see where you're coming from there. But it doesn't prevent me from enjoying it. You know what I mean? I've said in videos before, and actually I mentioned it in one of my recent Star Trek videos. One of my favorite TV shows ever is NYPD Blue. A lot of people just do not like cop shows at all, just by definition, just categorically. They don't watch cop shows. They don't like cop shows. They don't like anything that like glorifies the police or elicits like the viewer to have sympathy with cops. And I totally get that and respect that and see where they're coming from. And I think it's important, if I were going to do videos about cop shows or, NYPD Blue in particular or whatever, I think it would be incredibly important for me to include that as a part of my critique and to point out, this is something that this show does or may do from time to time that could be like a harmful thing for our society if you're encouraging, people to take this heroic view of police officers when all too often that is not the case, or when the institution itself does not deserve that. But it doesn't mean that I can't still enjoy the show for other reasons. But as long as I'm aware of that, and I'm articulating that, and I'm not just dismissing that and saying like, oh, some people are too sensitive, or some people just, blah, blah, they can't enjoy anything. Like, that's not the way to go. You want to have an awareness of it. You want to, if you do indeed view it as a valid critique, because like you just said, I mean, sometimes people will make unreasonable demands, or will say things that you just don't think are worth taking seriously. And it's your right to make that decision, to make that judgment, as but
Yeah.
hopefully your initial reaction isn't to just dismiss it. You at least will give it a hearing before you decide.
No, that's the thing. Like, that's the important thing, is to think about it, because reactionary thought, just like basing your actions off of like reactionary thought is not very good. It's a shortcut. Sometimes it can be useful in a dangerous situation, but it's not the most useful thing in regular lifetime events. And I think everyone probably, or a lot of people, have a show that like, I know there are these bad things about it, but I'll still watch it anyway. And sometimes you're like, I don't know if that's their intent to be bad, but even if it's not their intent, they still did something that can have a negative view. Sorry, I'm thinking of The Boys.
Yeah, well, that 100%. I was actually just thinking about it recently too. With I'm doing a video next month on neurodiversity representation and autism representation in Star Trek, and I was looking into characters like Barclay, and I found so many people who hate Barclay because they think he's an offensive and stereotypical view of neurodiversity. Then I found people too who really actually loved him and thought he was a very well done look at people who are neurodiverse, even if he's somewhat allegorical. And it's like, oh, people's perspective on the same thing, even within a community, can shift on something. And so it's sort of like always constantly being self-aware of the criticisms and trying to let them have a voice inside your content and be like, all right, I understand where this criticism is coming from and why it may have some validity or entirely be valid, but also this is what I draw from it, or this is what I think is another point that speaks greater to myself in that way.
One of the hi, by the way, sorry about
that. We've awakened the internet COVID, which has been messing with the internet.
Now I'm imagining like it's like a dragon. It's like a dragon like hiding. We've awoken it.
I'm gonna say that it's telecommunicable again, because I said that earlier. And I stepped on.
Yeah, sorry, Christy, you're probably immune because you've had it before. But Steve, I am so sorry.
Oh no! But once I get over it, I'll have the antibodies, and then I'll be.
You'll in 3 days. You'll be.
In 3 days. Yeah.
Well, with enough steroids.
I'm not even going to take another test.
Yeah,
I'm sure
it's fine.
With enough steroids, you can function just fine.
With enough steroids, you can fly to the moon. Apparently.
Christy, you were saying.
I don't remember.
Oh no! I am so sorry.
I stepped on my power cord, which is a thing I do once in a very great while, because it slowly shifts towards me while I'm sitting here.
Well, at least the cat didn't turn off your computer, which has happened to me.
Yes.
I mean,
there's I think maybe because of my age. There's a lot of the whether something is being a trans ally or not discussion on almost any time some trans issue comes up in media at all. I find, and it's like, well, to be perfectly honest, as long as you're not calling us names, I'm good, you know?
Well, I mean, that's a step in a good direction. But
This is, I mean, speaking as a non-trans person,
my
it sounds like
theory-
a little bit of a low bar.
well,
But
it is. But some people like. I mean, I'm not saying that you should focus on that bar because it's an easy bar to focus on if you're trans. If you're just like, oh, this person treated me with basic decency, they're the best person in the world. It's very easy to have that feeling, and there have been many jokes about it before. But you can't expect everyone to be a good, like, okay, I generally am like, there are certain people who are trans allies, and those are the people who fight for trans people and speak out and all that stuff. And then there are some people who are not being assholes. And I'm like, that's also a decent thing. Like, I realize there's a lot of problems with Stephen King, but at least he signed the goddamn letter. So it's like, yeah, I know Stephen King isn't the worst. he somehow managed to get, J.K. Rowling managed to get on a lower bar than Stephen King, which was actually hard to do, but she managed it. So
yeah, I always try to come with that sort of stuff. I always try to come back to what's the intent, or what's the like, what are they trying to get across? Because especially with trans stuff, but in a lot of other things as well, it's like not everyone has the terminology or education or awareness, or has had chance to have access to that education and awareness. And so they may say things incorrectly or screw up, or even get things completely wrong, but their intention is like, I want to be supportive. It's like, hey, yeah, like Patton Oswalt has a great bit that I was just about to do. Patton Oswalt does this great bit about trans stuff. It's like, yeah, there's a guy wants to turn into a girl. I don't know. Let him do it. Who the fuck cares? Let them do whatever the hell they want. It's a great bit that he does. And it's like, yeah, that person does care. And so that's what I always try to like look at where the intent is. But that's also hard to do, especially online, where it's like context is oftentimes removed from the situation. So you kind of have to try and read it. Because I get so many comments on my videos, for example, that is like, hey, is this person a she or a he or whatever? And I read that comment, you could read it as like, oh, are they a she or a he? But then I learned that if I just respond like, oh, I'm actually, transgender, I identify as a woman, to that comment, more people will be like, oh, thank you. And so it's like, and we'll actually be like, oh, I didn't know that. And so it's trying, my rule of thumb with that sort of stuff is like always trying to assume best possible intent, but never over assume good intent, I guess.
Yeah, I think
Patton Oswalt liked one of my tweets, so is that too much of a trend?
Color me impressed.
Wow.
the secret goal, just to have like Patton Oswalt or anyone who's more famous. I'm sorry, Steve Shives, you're not good enough. Like, I know you retweeted something of mine. I like that. I thought that was cool at the time to some degree. But
it's I get silly about that sometimes, but it's one of those.
Everyone does.
It's Patton Oswalt.
Well, yes, and this is something I discussed in an after show of not long ago, because I was really having a couple of bad months, and if famous people are liking what I'm saying, then cool. And Kurt Busiek coming to my defense, for instance, that was really off. That was awesome. He's one of my favorite writers. So.
See, that's more impressive to me than Patton Oswalt.
Yeah.
I mean,
and Patton Oswalt is very impressive because I'm a huge fan of his, but Kurt Busiek is is more impressive to the 90s comic book reading kid that is still living within me.
The one that made me happiest was I got Robert Hewitt Wolf retweeted my Biden is Shakar from Deep Space Nine video. So I was like, oh, I've made it. I've hit the bar.
So back to the topic. Not to be too harsh. Occasionally get back to the topic. And then it's the free-form conversation technically, but occasionally we might get back to the topic. But hear me out. At what point do you think does forgiveness apply to someone's reputation? Like, what if someone has like if someone has a bad reputation before and did bad things, at what point are you at what point do you think that they've changed, and at what point does forgiveness seem worth it for that person? Or at what point does it seem worth it to forgive that person?
I think it's case by case.
I've seen a lot of people who held the attitude of, if you held still on an issue long enough for me to put a label on you, then you're never allowed to change. And I don't agree with that as a principle, that they will never allow somebody, no matter how much they say, I no longer hold that position, they're endowed with it.
I think, I agree. I think it's like, it's a case by case person with each person that comes up, but it's also a case by case thing with every person who is doing the forgiving as well. Like, if there's a content creator who does something awful and I find it very, very offensive, but eventually they do the work and they do the things that I personally consider to be enough for me to forgive them for that thing, I don't expect my forgiveness to mean that everyone else has forgiven that person or forgiven that creator for doing those things. I'm like, I'm trying to think of, I can think of like a few specific examples. I guess like one that I would use would be ContraPoints. There was the whole big thing a few months ago where ContraPoints sort of got into a lot of trouble for having Buck Angel on one of her videos. And a lot of people were very offended by that. And we can talk about the whole harassment that she faced. That's kind of its own separate issue. But in terms of actually having Buck Angel on her platform, for me personally, I forgave her for that. I found her reasoning and her discussion and her acknowledgement of why it was a mistake to be enough for me to forgive her and move on and still enjoy her content in that way. But my forgiveness doesn't mean that I can't totally understand if there are people who's like, no, I have to be done with her because of that, because it offended me or hurt me in such a specific way. And so I wouldn't place my forgiveness on other people. So it really is a case-by-case basis for how much harm it was the person caused, and also your own personal lines as well.
I'm very much thinking specifically of two people, which would be how did Dusty Smith manage it, and how is Shoe on Head not managing it?
Well, you know, I think it comes like what Jessie just said about it being a very personal thing is important, and a case by case thing. Because actually, like the two people you just mentioned, Christy, I'm perfectly able to forgive Dusty and to accept that he is making an effort to be better, you know. And I actually see that, like I see that in his content. He's been at it long enough now that I think I can accept that he is being sincere, you know, and he's not just, well, time to shift gears, you know, like the right wing thing didn't work, so now it's time to shift gear. Like I genuinely believe that, you know, he has come around on certain things and that he is trying to make amends and trying to do something different, right? And, you know, he and I aren't like super close buddies, but we never were to begin with. But, you know, like he'll tweet something and I'll retweet it, or I'll like something, whatever. Like we're, you know, relatively on pretty cordial terms, you know. And if he wanted to discuss something privately with me, like I would read that message. I would be open, you know. shoe on head, exactly the opposite. You know what I mean? Like, there's just nothing. I don't like, and part of it is personal because she and a lot of other people sort of that were in her circle, made videos about me and about my wife and about friends of mine, and about other and people who I didn't know and had nothing to do with, but that didn't deserve that type of abuse and harassment. Um, and me personally, they can all go to hell. And it doesn't matter whether they asked me to forgive them or not. It would make no difference. Like, they get nothing from me and they can die mad about it. And I don't care. But if somebody else had a different perspective, if somebody else thought that, well, maybe they are being sincere, maybe they have come around and changed their ways or whatever, I wouldn't necessarily judge that person poorly for it. That's a very personal thing. And like I say, maybe my reasons for not forgiving them are also very personal and don't apply to everybody else. So it's a really really tricky thing, and it is something where I do think it's important to give people space to make up their own minds. And it's all very subjective. And yet a lot depends on what the person did that they are requiring forgiveness for, how you perceive that thing, if that is to you an unforgivable thing. Like, it's all very, very subjective, and very contingent on a lot of different things. And there is this tendency, unfortunately, with a lot of people, myself included. I don't want to say a lot of people, like other people have this problem. I don't. I totally have this problem too. That you kind of divide people up into tribes and you're like, well, he's a friend of mine, so I'll let him off the hook. But, he's not, so, he can go fuck himself. I feel like it's really important to give people space to figure these things out for themselves,
And I think the other thing too that I just sort of thought of while you were talking too, that we also need to be cognizant of is why we're allowing forgiveness for some people over others and what the bar is for certain people. Because I think of, for example, Louis C.K., who I think did some pretty awful stuff, but has started to get like a general forgiveness by the general. Like, my brother was like, yeah, I forgive Louis C.K. And it's like, I don't see that Louis C.K. did any of the work to receive that. But I think we give him a general, popular culture sort of gives him the benefit of the doubt because his bar was set so low, partially because of privilege, partially because like he never stood up for these issues to begin with. Whereas like, we'll take someone who, was supposed to be like, you were the chosen one. You were supposed to be someone who like knows all these things and fell from grace. And it takes a lot longer for us to forgive that person, even when they put in the work to show forgiveness, because we have that sort of higher bar for them. And also, again, probably privilege and identity plays into that as well.
Well, so one of the things, obviously, I think the general point that most people here would agree on, if not everyone, is you can't demand you can't demand forgiveness, and forgiveness needs to be a consensual thing. You have to actually want forgiveness, and you have to be willing to, and the other person has to want to forgive you. And
see, for me as a consumer of media, I it's much less about my forgiving them or anything like that. It's whether or not their offense to me interrupts my watching whatever they're doing. Will I have trouble watching their an actor because I know something about them and it just gets in the way and it keeps coming up and it interrupts my suspension of disbelief and I'm out of the moment and that kind of thing? Or how often does this, just the director of a thing, I go, I know who directed this, and that's beginning to bother me as I'm watching it. It's not anything to do with the movie. It's that my thoughts have wandered because of who directed it. And that means that I can't really watch old things sometimes because of what I know about how this sausage was made.
Yeah, and
that interferes with it. That's where I draw the line, is when I'm going, I can't watch because it I will think about it and it upsets me.
Yeah, but I mean, there's also stuff where
Haven't tried reading a J.K. Rowling book but recently, but
I mean, I haven't read a J.K. Rowling book in a while.
yeah.
I mean, I see that's also hard for me too, because I have trouble sleeping, and one of the things that helps me sleep is the Harry Potter books, actually, like listening to the audiobooks of them. And so I have this weird struggle where it's like I have to, like, for my own mental health, I have to like cognitively separate her from her work just because it helps me sleep. So it's just like a weird line. It's like, I don't like, number one, J.K. Rowling hasn't done any of the work to want to be forgiven. In fact, she's actively doubling down and doing more harm. But there's also this part of it is like, oh, this work means a lot to me and helps me in certain ways, and I try to divorce myself from it, but I can't fully. So it's also like somewhat separate too from the work they produce. It's a whole complicated thing.
Well, I mean, and like who is reading the audio? Is it J.K. Rowling?
Oh God, no! It's Jim Dale, who is a lovely, amazing human.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. You can. That's one of the ways that people can separate stuff from that. Like, I can watch the J.K. the Harry Potter series because the four main characters have like completely different opinions from J.K. Rowling. And I like the idea of supporting that. I like the. A lot of creative works aren't just one person's thing. A lot of it involves more people, and sometimes whether people agree with you or not makes a difference. Sometimes it doesn't. Now, that being said, I can understand why there are certain personality types that I don't think I can forgive.
Yeah.
That I'm just like, I think but that, to be fair, that's because I don't think there's enough self-reflection for them to actually change, or for me to believe that they actually changed, even if they did. It's my own personal bias, which everyone's got biases because everyone grew up in a culture.
Yeah.
We live in a society.
I was just about to make that joke.
Somebody had to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard not to. I think.
I refuse to live in a society.
I do not live in a society.
So is that along with the apolitical content?
Yeah.
Why does everything have to be political?
Why does everything have to be political and influenced by society? It's so weird.
I just live adjacent to a society, you see.
Yeah.
Well, for those who don't know, my kid is trans as well. It's tricky. So my ex-wife has been working very hard at the ally thing, but oh dear. I mean, so I grant her a lot of benefit of the doubt on that, but she had the entire Harry Potter series of movies stacked up by the TV the other night, and it's like, why are we doing this?
Hey, the Harry Potter movies have have main characters who all three of the main characters of that just ignore what's his face, the guy who sides with J.K. Rowling. Just ignore that guy. Just focus on Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley. And don't think too much about the fact that J.K. Rowling simultaneously did try, at the very least said that she was going for inclusion, but also made Ron Weasley to be a joke character, and the last name Weasley, because he's redheaded, like, that's just fucked up in British terms, to my knowledge. But those three people have all spoken against what J.K. Rowling said. And those 3 people are just as much that movie as J.K. Rowling and the director and the musician and the guy who played Dumbledore and the other guy who played Dumbledore.
Yeah, well, movies, it's a lot trickier because movies are much more of a collaborative effort. Like I know for me, because I'm not, I've never been as much of a Harry Potter fan. I never read the books at all. I've never.
I'm out. See it? No.
I've never.
Sorry, you've been canceled. The Flute Voice is now canceling Steve Shives because of not reading Harry Potter. Which is a weird choice to it's a weird hill to die on, I know.
I suppose I'll just be over here doing this.
Oh, hey, has anybody read the Bloody Jack series? Because I just read the first one of those last week, and that's really fucking good.
No.
But it's about a young girl who disguises herself as a boy to serve aboard a pirate ship.
Oh, okay.
And
that's going on my list.
I was like, yeah, it was recommended to me, and there's a whole series. I've only read the first one so far, but it was really, really good. And I have no idea if the author has since been revealed as a problematic monster or not. Hopefully not.
Well,
they're not pirates. They're not pirates. They're sailors who hunt pirates. I don't want to mischaracterize the book. They're sailors in Her Majesty's Navy. They hunt pirates. So, but they're not actually a pirate ship. But anyway, but yeah, movies are a much more collaborative. Much more of a collaborative thing. Like for me, one of my favorite superhero movie is Superman Returns, and it was directed by Bryan Singer, and it stars Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. That sucks.
Yeah, I have a little trouble with that one.
That sucks, but so and it is, I didn't watch it at all for almost 2 years after the Kevin Spacey stuff came out. I was just like, oh God, I just don't, I didn't.
He's one of the ones I was thinking of with the actor that you go, he's really a compelling actor.
Yeah.
Every scene he's in, I end up thinking about the issues, and it breaks the immersion.
Yeah. It just can't. Problem. And it wasn't when I did finally go back a couple months ago and watch Superman Returns again. I was okay. Like, it didn't take me out of the movie. I was able to enjoy it, but it's always in the back of my mind, and I'm always thinking like, God damn it. Why did you have to be such a fucking asshole? And that's very selfish, because I'm wishing that, because why can't I just enjoy my movie? Like, he actually hurt people, like he actually ruined people's lives, but I'm sitting here going, oh, and he ruined this movie too, gosh darn it. But it's, with movies, it's because there are other people involved, like Ozma said about the Harry Potter movies, the stars of Harry Potter for the most part have been really good in the aftermath of J.K. Rowling outing herself as a horrible transphobe. It's just Rowling herself that is making it really, really difficult to enjoy her work on its own merit without having to, reckon with the fact that it was written by this person who is apparently really, really determined to be a terrible human being. So yeah, I mean, a lot depends on that too. Like, if it is a singular vision, a singular work of a person who turns out to be a shit, it's a lot easier to say, okay, I can do without this. Whereas if you're watching,
and naturally,
anything with Jeffrey Jones has that.
Oh
for me.
Yeah, and he was in Amadeus, which is one of my favorite movies ever. And it's like, God damn you, Jeffrey Jones.
But
yeah, I mean, interesting to. No, sorry.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say that there are certain things when, because most people you can't tell. Usually, it requires something really bad for you to know for sure. And I always, with things, I tend to, try to it's like yellow card versus red card. I'm like, this is a yellow card situation. I'm keeping an eye on you. If you like dig deeper into that, then fuck this shit. I don't want to watch it.
Yeah, but there's
people
things.
get...
Kevin Spacey, for instance, is, from what I know, and that has been confirmed on both sides as a fair certainty, the best scenario I can write is still a what the fuck? Okay, it doesn't get good. It doesn't get it, at any point in there. Writing as charitable and understanding as I can, it still is what the fuck.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, it all depends on like where people. Again, it goes back to the personal choice and where people can draw the line, because I can understand like being able to watch something with Kevin Spacey in it and being like, all right, well, I can divorce like my feelings on Kevin Spacey from this movie because, you know, he's playing a character. He's not actually there. He didn't write the thing. So the actual like storyline isn't from his point of view. But then also there are people who are much more they're much more visual or unable to take that as like they look at his face and they see they can just instantly are made to think of everything that he's done. And so that's a much harder line to cross. And I also think, again, it's just how much is this person's voice coming into the work? Like another example that I was going to bring in, and Steve, you kind of touched on this too, but one example that I'm going to J.K. Rowling to overuse her as the metaphor. There are Harry Potter things that are coming out in the future. She has the Fantastic Beasts movie, and then there's a new video game coming out with Harry Potter that I was really looking forward to. And there's this element of me that's like, well, I don't want to see the Fantastic Beasts movie at all. I don't give a crap. I mean, they're not that great anyways, but I don't want to see them at all because she wrote it. She created it. She's like, her voice, the voice behind that work, the predominant voice behind that work, besides maybe the director, will be hers because she actually put pen to paper and her ideology is seeped in that. The
video game, though, and Eddie Redmayne didn't help.
Yeah, well, Eddie Redmayne's this whole separate issue. We discussed that too. But the video game was created by a team completely separate with people, and I've actually read stuff about the game where the people behind the game almost were like, should we not do this game anymore because of what J.K. Rowling said, which speaks to me that's like, oh, the people behind this game were passionate about it, wanted to create this thing, and are themselves conflicted about the work. And so there's an element of me that's like, well, I am still curious to play that game. The people behind it and the bigger authoritarian voice in it isn't J.K. Rowling's. And so my plan with that is like, I'm not going to buy it new because I don't want to give the money to J.K. Rowling, but I'll still buy the game used so that I can still play it and enjoy it and not help her as directly. But that's like, again, that's my personal line in the sand to draw that like I can't give to other people because other people have different lines.
And I think it is very personal because I think it is largely a big part of it is how directly and offended you were by what happened and that kind of thing. I mean, where it could be very different experience for some people where in part being brought that memory could be more traumatic for some people, where it's annoying for me, it might be traumatizing for them, where they might be obsessively mulling over whatever it is because of that, you know?
Yeah, so I wanted to take this. You know what? I'm going to give... There are good examples of this for the opposite. So, Twilight. The main character who plays the vampire in Twilight, like, does not give a fuck about the series and is like internally made fun of what's, well, I've read part of it. I would say it's not well written. It's comically not well written. And it's just like, that kind of makes me more okay with the idea of watching Twilight because I know the main character doesn't care. I feel like these things can sometimes work in the opposite direction. than simply the negative. I mean, with a lot of things, there are negatives and positives, and I think both aspects can influence decisions and influence your enjoyment of a product.
I will say, after I learned what Robert Pattinson's attitude toward the Twilight series was, it made me more interested in watching the movies again, because by that point I had already seen all the movies and regretted wasting all those hours of my life. They're fun movies to watch, like if you're watching them with other people and you just want to do Mystery Science Theater and make fun of them. They're great for that. I mean, they're really great for that. But yeah, it was like when you learn that, oh, one of the lead actors is, is like, oh boy, this is just the dumbest thing ever, right? Like it gives you an extra layer to sort of watch it and go, ooh, you know what I mean? Like,
and he's just like, oh yeah, no, this vampire's a terrible person. I'm playing into that.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Is there a layer of that self-awareness in the performance that you can detect? Like, that's an interesting, thing to me. Like, how does he let us know that he knows that he's really uncomfortable with this character?
The more I hear about Robert Pattinson, the more I love the guy, because there was actually a quote I think I read from him where he was saying, like, all the people that keep saying I'm going to screw up playing Batman makes me kind of want to screw up playing Batman. And I just love that idea of like, it's like, you keep coming at me, I will do it on purpose.
Yeah, I know. That's just, yeah.
We have someone in the chat. I don't usually watch the chat because I can't usually. It just I happen to have it on here. There has been somebody in chat who's been kind of insistent on getting an answer to a question, which is, do you think J.K. Rowling hates trans people? And partly asked to you as a cis person, but so is Perfict. So I'm actually curious.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's Bearing.
Yeah, it's Bearing.
Oh, I don't answer questions from trolls. Bearing can go fuck himself.
As far as it goes, I can make the case of transphobic in the things she has said. Whether she in her heart of hearts is doing it because she wants to vilify trans people or because she has ignorantly adopted a position which is transphobic, that's for her God to decide. It's not my issue, but I can make the case that what she's saying is transphobic, as in an irrational hatred or fear.
I'll click here. Just say, yeah. I'm not going to kick somebody out of chat without them. He's being
cordial.
He's being relatively cordial. So,
well, nobody has to kick anybody out. I'm just saying, for me personally, I don't answer questions from trolls, and he can go fuck himself.
Yeah. See, like this is what we talked about earlier in terms of forgiveness and how you should have taken some money and made a video saying that essentially the same thing. No, no, I mean, ultimately anyone can potentially change, and that's the thing. Like, there are certain aspects of stereotypes in people's minds, and sometimes there's something that just breaks their ability to dehumanize people, and to some degree, I do care about that, which is why I try not to block people unless they're an actual manipulative risk. I consider them to be an actual manipulative risk. I more often get blocked by people than I do block people. Like I said, except for like rapists and child molesters and groomers and people promoting that shit. That shit gets the block. Like, I want to create a community that's at least a little safe for people. And also, if they're charismatic enough, you know, if I just unfollow, I might accidentally follow them again and then need to be informed, which that always sucks. But yeah, I think J.K. Rowling has fallen into the sort of gender critical attitude, and that in itself is relatively cult like. So it's not like I think J.K. Rowling is necessarily a mastermind, but I see her as Tom Cruise is to Scientology. That's kind of how I see J.K. Rowling to the gender critical movement.
Yeah.
The thing
a useful tool.
Trans insensitive, trans offensive. They make it very clear that she does not think that people are the gender that they are. They are the gender that she thinks they are.
Yes.
But regardless of their opinion is not important. Hers is the only one that matters. She is the final arbiter of gender.
Well, I mean, some of this relates to, I mean, there's misinformation that J.K. Rowling has presented, or at the very least, very misleadingly framed facts or whatnot, especially about trans men and fitting into this whole transgender narrative, which is not really what is not something that's verified by most scientific journals outside of the that one person who they always cite who wasn't considered to have made a good study.
Sorry.
Oh, go on. Sorry, that was it.
My whole feelings on this whole topic, if we're talking about J.K. Rowling, whether she hates trans people, I don't think she actively hates trans people. But I've fallen into it too. It's like I have an empathy for what she feels and what she's gone through, because a lot of TERF ideology, if we're being honest, if you really look into it and how they discuss things and how they talk about it, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but in a lot of the case, a lot of that comes out of trauma, and a lot of it is framed by trauma. A lot of people who subscribe to the gender critical ideology and are so vehemently for it are basing it out of fear and a place of real and true trauma. I mean, even J.K. Rowling herself states in her essay, like she talks about her assault and things like that, which again there is a level of empathy from me there, but that is often used disingenuously, wielded as a way to say like, well, of course then I'm right, or allows you to forgive them overly too much. It was like, well, yeah, of course she doesn't mean to hurt trans people, and yeah, she is hurting trans people, but it's not coming from a bad place. And it's like, but there has to be, again, that line in the sand of like, but she is still actively causing harm, and she still is actively doubling down on harm when she has had every chance to do the research, to do the learning. It's not like she is someone who has not had a chance to continually be ignorant, like who hasn't had access to these tools and people wanting to have a genuine conversation with her. And so, yeah, it's very much a case of like, I have empathy, I have understanding for that, and I understand where it comes from. And so I don't want to ever be dismissive of people's actual real trauma. But that doesn't allow me to forgive when you are harming others. As I said in like another video, just because you are part of a marginalized group who has been harmed does not mean that you get to push that, you get to marginalize another group even further, or harm a group who is even more marginalized than you. And it's a very complicated issue because it's all about trying to find a sense of control. Like, you can't get back at the people who are harming you. Like J.K. Rowling and a lot of TERFs cannot, it feels overwhelming to fight the specific people who harm them, and also like the idea of the patriarchy as a whole, as a thing that harms them and harms women. And so the way they shift that is like, well, and I don't think they do this cognitively, but it's what they are doing. It's like, well, I can shift that to a group that like tangentially in my mind can be framed as the villain, and I can beat them. And so I can feel a sense of control in my own trauma and my own life by winning this fight because I have more power than they do. And again, it's complicated because I don't think anyone really thinks of it cognitively in those terms. Like, I don't think she's like, well, I'm going to gain control over my trauma by attacking trans people. But that there is an element of that. And so it's just a complicated thing of, if we're going back to try and bring it back to the theme of forgiveness and to wrap out the point of that, it's like,
well, actually, the theme was reputation, but
well, yeah, I guess we're kind of going all over the place. But like,
that was hours ago.
Yeah, I guess it's just sort of like, I can't forgive her because she has not done nothing to be forgiven, like done none of the work to be forgiven. And it's like, and I feel like we sometimes forgive people because their intent isn't to harm, but they are. So there's a difference between having done harm and doing the work to try to be forgiven, and we can decide whether or not to forgive them, or someone who's actively doing harm, whether they want to or not, I guess is sort of the line there.
Yeah. And I mean, it's already been sort of brought up, but I mean, just to reiterate, like, or to, agree. I mean, if you are actively causing harm, it doesn't matter what your intentions are.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least it matters very little. I don't want to say it doesn't matter at all, but it matters very little what your intentions are. If you're actively causing harm, and especially if you're aware of it, and you continue to do the thing that causes harm, it kind of ties back into what I was saying a little while ago about what people who used to make, or I guess still make, videos in the atheist community on YouTube. I don't pay any attention to it, but like, oh, do they really believe that? Or are they just saying that to get views or to court a certain audience? Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if J.K. Rowling, just hates trans people in her heart and intentionally wants to cause them harm and to ruin their lives and to make life even more difficult. It doesn't matter. That's what she's doing.
Yeah, I think, well, I think that in some higher moral court that does matter. But it doesn't matter to the people that you're directly offending.
Right.
Well, I think with relation to that, we don't know J.K. Rowling. We don't know. It's not like we know her personally. We don't know. We only know what little about her that comes up. So.
Yeah, I read the words that she chose to share. Those are what I'm judging on.
Well, yeah, but like in terms of intent, like you can never entirely ascertain most people's intent for sure. There's some people you're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure based off of how focused you are on it, what your intent is. But even then, you can't know for sure. So when it comes to judgment calls, I mean, it's like murder.
You are way too nice.
So, if you kill someone, if you murder someone, yes, first degree, second degree, third degree murder matters, but most people care about the fact that you caused someone to die by your actions. And if it was murder, it was likely an unarmed person. Like, it's hard to care about all the specifics of actions when you're like, yeah, she influences, like J.K. Rowling has influence on. I know there's some government officials who are genuinely influenced by J.K. Rowling as a person. Like, she does actually have an impact that affects.
It happened,
the livelihood of trans people in the UK.
It's happening right now. There are trans people without medication right now because of indirectly, but because of J.K. Rowling in the UK.
And in a more general sense, what I was trying to be saying is that dealing with the murder, if you have murdered a family member of mine, someone that I love and care about, I'm going to be mad at you, and I expect that you will care and that Steve will care that they had mitigating circumstances and that it was a momentary lapse and that it wasn't a planned murder and all those things. but don't expect me to care about that. I'm the one who's actually offended, and those are not particularly meaningful to me at the moment, you know.
And also, sorry.
Maybe next week, maybe later, I might care about those subtleties. That's up to me. I can decide whether or not I ever care about those subtleties.
Yeah. And I also think to extend the murder metaphor out further, it's like it's also it's just keep
I
it
love
going.
that we're talking about murder at this point in the stream.
Yeah. But I mean, like to extend that out further, it's also like
on potential life-threatening stuff. So why not just throw murder in there randomly?
Start with COVID, get to murder. What's next?
Exactly.
But I mean, to extend that further, though, I keep going. Like it also depends on like who the person is committing the harm to, because we have seen very clearly in stark contrast that like white men will often white cisgender men, sorry, Stephen Perfict.
We're the worst. I don't take offense.
Yeah. But they get forgiven more often for when they commit harm because of who they are. And we're as a society, we're willing to give them more forgiveness than we would say a person of color or a black man or anything like that, or any people like that. So,
or someone who's trans.
And I've gotten like myself too, when talking about J.K. Rowling, I get from cis people who are like, well, again, the whole thing we're talking about, like, well, she didn't intend to harm trans people, so why are you harping on it? Why are you going after her? Why are you hating her? It's like, well, she's causing my community harm, but you're blaming me for reacting against that. And a lot of cis people are able to forgive J.K. Rowling because they are not directly harmed by her. And they can say, well, she didn't intend it. It's like, I can't, because I'm harmed. And we need people who are not harmed. As much as it sucks, we need people who are not harmed by J.K. Rowling to take a stand and say, no, this is important to care about, because people will use the defense like, well, you're too emotionally compromised by the situation, which is a bullshit argument to begin with, but it's how people will frame it. It's like, well, you're too emotionally invested in the trans, community, so you can't really adequately talk about this issue, which is bullshit.
Yeah.
Well, that's why allies are so important.
Yeah, black people have no interest in actually preventing their murders.
Too close to it. They're too close to it.
Absolutely. I mean, even if you are close, I mean, with the trans, I'm going to wander back to the trans thing and my family situation. There was a point at which I sat down with my kid and said, of the other two here, who are very lovely people and I've been friends with, well, I was married to one of them for ages, that they will support us, but they will never understand us. As I get more, and that goes directly to what you said. I was, when we were all in a frenzy about the J.K. Rowling stuff, when it was really hitting hard, one of them did say, well, why are you on about this? What do you care what some British author has to say? Well, a lot of my best friends are British authors, but that's so I don't blame all of them, but
all of them. I hate British authors.
That's what they all say, Christy. Everybody has a best friend who's a British author.
Yeah, and but yeah, and it was damaging the kid a bit. Because he won't speak up for himself a lot, and I am nothing but speaking up for myself. And it just didn't get it, and it was kind of like, at some point we have to just understand that nobody really gets what someone else is going through, and there is a level of forgiveness I can have that a lot of people don't, And it just, I grew up as an asshole, so I'm enough people have forgiven me. I think I can return that a little bit. Although, of course, it does depend. Yeah, as we were saying.
I think a lot of it, I mean, to sort of piggyback on something that Jessie said a minute ago, and I've thought for a long time that where your sympathies lie says a lot about you as a person. And if you are someone, especially if you're like me and you're not a trans person, you're a cis person, and you're sort of, not directly affected by the things that someone like J.K. Rowling says, and not directly harmed by it, I think it says a lot about you where your sympathies lie. If you are a witness to this, and you see someone with a huge platform and a lot of influence like J.K. Rowling using that platform and that influence to further marginalize a group of people that are already marginalized to an obscene degree, and your reaction to that is to try and make her case for her, and to try and say, well, maybe she's just been misunderstood, or maybe we should take a more charitable view of what she says and try to understand where she's coming from and give her the benefit of the doubt. And you have hardly a word, if even a word, to spare for the people who are being harmed by her, and saying so and articulating how they are being harmed by that and how they are being threatened by it. That says something about you. That tells me something about you. And because I'm the kind of person that tends to, come to conclusions about people based on, things like that, my provisional conclusion about you might be, and I could still change my mind about this, and you could prove me wrong, or give me reason to think otherwise, but my provisional conclusion about you would be that you're a massive piece of shit. And that you side with oppressors rather than the oppressed. Whether you see it that way or not, whether you think that's what you're doing or not, that's, from where I stand, that's what you're doing. And I don't think you should do that. And the fact that people would instinctively, the people who signed that what was it, the Harper's letter, or about in support of J.K. Rowling and all, like that tells me something about you. If your response is to rush to her to defense, or to try to justify what she said, or try to justify her position, or say, oh no, it doesn't mean that she hates trans people, or it doesn't mean that she's this or that, and you're not worried about the people that she's actually harming, that tells me where your priorities are.
Well,
and it's not good, and it doesn't tell me anything good about
trans people. She just wants to make it safe for everybody to go to the bathroom.
Oh, that's it. Of course. Of course.
I would complicate that a little bit. Just a hair, to be fair, because
so will I when you get done, remember.
Because because I feel like there is also an element of like where your humanization of the person prior, because I feel like for the situation with J.K. Rowling specifically, like she has been someone in the public eye and consciousness for a long time. And so she has already been humanized. And so a lot of people are already kind of primed in a lot of ways to humanize her, as opposed to trans people as a giant monolith group. And so are instantly sort of like, oh, I want to try and see her point of view because I know her and I get her and I can see her as an individual person, as opposed to like all of trans people. And it's something that I think about in the videos that I make, because I've done a fair few videos on J.K. Rowling. And what I try to do with that is try to direct that feeling of like, oh, I want to humanize J.K. Rowling in a direction that gets to the point that I really want people to feel. Because I spend a fair amount of time in my videos trying to be like, here's probably what J.K. Rowling is feeling and going through at this moment. And then trying to get people to understand, like, here's why what she is feeling is real and valid, but here's why it's a problem. And here's why it harms trans people. And here's what trans people are feeling about that. To try and connect those dots, to try and get to humanizing trans people specifically, but through the humanizing of her first. And so I do think like if your impetus is to side with her and then immediately use your platform or whatever thing you have to do to defend her, like the people signing the Harper's letters, like, yeah, that's, I 100% agree with you, Steve, on that, because that says something about you. If like you're willing to use your voice and your platform to not give any empathy towards trans people. But I also understand to a degree the initial reaction to want to side with J.K. Rowling, just hearing about it as like your first impetus because she has been like someone humanized for so long as opposed to just trans people overall.
Yeah.
The
Oh God, I was just gonna say, Christy, you had something to say.
well, just Jessie makes very good points, and I wind up just listening to them and being enraptured by them and completely going off of what I was going to say.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Oh no, not at all. That's why I listened to you in the first place. I'm sorry, I got lost. And also, one of our rotating co-hosts did ask a question on an Ann Coulter video.
Is that okay? That's got to be Sophia, right?
Yeah.
I think every time we talk, I get asked about the Ann Coulter video. So, I made an Ann Coulter video a long time ago when it was part of when I was still doing a series called 5 Stupid Things, that I no longer do. And that I changed the title of before I stopped doing it anyway, because I decided I didn't want to have the word stupid in the title anymore, because I decided that it was ableist, and I didn't want. I try not to even like, use that word in everyday conversation if I can avoid it. But in the Ann Coulter video, there's a segment where I call Ann Coulter the C word about 1 million times. Like I just use the C word repeatedly to refer to Ann Coulter. And after I made that video, probably a couple years after I made, not right away, but eventually I sort of, had like a come to Jesus moment about using that kind of language, not profanity, but like misogynist, like referring to women with that kind of language. And I decided I didn't want to use that word anymore. And because I used that word in that video, like 11,000 times, like there was a segment where the whole joke was me finding creative ways to call Ann Coulter that word. And I put that video on private because I didn't want that that video of me like gratuitously using this gendered slur about Ann Coulter to be on my. I didn't want that to be on my channel. I didn't want that to represent who I was. So I didn't take the video completely down, but I put it on private so nobody could see it. And Sophia has implored me to put that video back up pretty much ever since.
Well, it's because it's different in the UK, and so
yeah.
I mean, yeah, and
I get it, but I'm just not comfortable.
So you just need to make it. Find a way to make it private in the US.
Yes,
you make a special channel just for the UK and put that video up. Just that video.
Yes.
Just do it with a British accent. Hello, this is Steve on the UK. I'm sorry, apologies to all the UK viewers for that.
That's exactly the accent I would use too.
What?
I've used that word. I've used that word exactly once in my life, and it was in relation to listening to Liz Cheney. So,
I can't remember. I don't remember what swear words I have used and what swear words I haven't used. I've used fuck a lot.
That's the best. Fuck is the best word.
Well, yeah, because fuck you can fucking use however the fuck you want to use it.
This is true.
Fuck yeah, you can.
I have a complicated story about the C word, because my first time I was ever called the C word was was having a huge argument with my roommate. We had been having this whole thing. It had been going on for days, and it finally exploded in this one moment. And he was screaming and yelling at me, and we were just going back at each other. And he's just like, "You C word, you C." I don't want to say it on your stream without without your permission because demonetization is a thing. So, but he's like, you C word, you awful C word. And like, I had I was like a weird reaction in the minute because it was like right after it was like a year or two after it come out. And I was like, it makes me really happy that even in your anger, you are gendering properly. And I was like, it's funny, but it's also like it's such an easy thing to do to an anger to misgender someone, and the very fact that you're respecting my humanity in your anger while also being pissed off in a misogynistic way is like so many layers of things I'm feeling at the moment is a whole thing.
That is the most complex I found a silver lining in the cloud story I've ever heard.
Oh, well, I mean, I feel like that to some degree, that aspect is knowing that you pass moment for any trans person who cares about whether or not they happen to pass, because chances are, if they're really racist and misogynistic, they probably are transphobic too. So if they are treating you like a woman, chances are you know that they mean it. And so therefore it's like, oh, you mean that, but also you said black people are just trying to fuck me, and you talked over me about Minnesota despite the fact that I said I lived most of my life here. So like it's the complicated feelings.
I get the idea this is really, you've got a specific instance in mind here, huh?
Yes, it was a very specific instance in my life that I have mentioned before.
Somebody, me saying something, giving out an idea, and someone, interrupting me right at the end, and then giving out the same idea and getting praised for it. I was like, that was my rite of passage. So.
But on that note, we are getting to the closing time of this show, and while it's potentially fine to chat afterwards, I'm afraid I don't want to stream this show too much longer because I'm lazy. No,
legitimately every YouTuber's feeling is like, I could go longer, but I'm lazy.
Exactly.
I could go, I just don't want to.
So let's start with you, Perfict, because you're the fastest person. Where can people find you, Perfict?
The Discord, the Rumpus Room, links down below, and do this every week. So here and there. That's where they can find me.
Anything new that you're working on?
Nope.
That's what I thought.
Just this.
Christy, where can people find you?
You can still find me on Christy Abbey. There hasn't been anything new up there in a little while. That will be changing. I also found a lost episode, which I'm going to post. So. I just, for some reason, I did several in 1 week, and one of them just got lost. Several interviews in 1 week, and one got lost.
It may not be brand new, but new to me.
Yeah, exactly. And it's with the person that I try and interview every once in a while, with Callan. Callan is like an impossible interview, and I'm going to crack that at some point. I'm on Twitter at Normality, Quake, and on Chris Abbey Music still exists. And that's and other stuff. We're starting to do live shows around here again, so I probably will be doing a lot more of that. Then I'm on stage. I'm away from everybody. I'm good. Just like the president said.
That worked out so well for him.
Yeah.
I'm not crying.
Jesse, where can people find you? Is there anything you're working on?
Yes. So you can find me at Jesse Gender on all the social medias, usually on Twitter, ranting about random whatever pops in my mind. But also on YouTube here at Jessie Gender. Do videos every week, and the next big video I have coming out is the one this Friday that I'm rather proud of, which is using film analysis and film theory to just dissect transgender representation throughout the years and modern trans representation in film. So I'm looking forward to that one and people's thoughts on it. So that'll be going up on Friday.
Okay, and because I'm saving Steve Shives for last, I will go. I can be found Ozma in the Dark just about everywhere. In fact, if you Google Ozma in the Dark, you might even find my Twitter, Talking to Nothing. It's Talking to Nothing minus the G. But yeah, OzmaInTheDark.com. I just tried to hammer that home. I have an Ozma in the Dark Reddit thing. I don't pay attention to Reddit at all. Anyways, as soon as I get my video on, so long as the COVID I officially am diagnosed with, assuming that doesn't kill me or put me in a really bad physical or state or whatnot, I will get the video of me and Sophia talking about the elections, because my breast augmentation surgery is going to be delayed. I'm pretty sure, because I got diagnosed with COVID. It's just going to be a chill week. But the COVID had to make me actually be motivated to do stuff this week. It's just not fair. Steve, where can people find you?
I didn't expect to be laughing at someone's COVID diagnosis this much.
Well, it's because I make jokes about
it.
Okay, and because I haven't experienced any serious symptoms, so like,
thank goodness.
Yeah, and so the fact that it's honestly, I'm relatively confident I'll survive fine. It does take the edge off of that.
It does tend to set a tone when the first line of the stream is, I got COVID, in that tone of voice. Okay, so anyway, you can find me on youtube.com/Steve Shives primarily. That's where you'll see more of me than you could ever possibly want to see. Actually, tomorrow is my Facepalm 5 live stream where I talk about current events and stuff like that. It's the second to last Facepalm 5 live stream ever, because I'm ending that series because I can't fucking take it anymore. And then on Wednesday I have a new Star Trek video coming out. Actually, Wednesday is going to be my Lower Decks season 1 review coming out, and also Wednesday evening I'm doing another fanfic live stream where I read a piece of fanfic, and that'll actually be the first part of a 3-part series where I'll be reading little snippets of a fanfic story this week and next week and the following week, which will be a lot of fun, and I hope people really dig it because it's a really cool story. And then on Friday is another Ask Away live stream of mine where people can ask me questions and stuff. So that's basically, and I also co-host a couple of podcasts with the great Jason Harding, where there's Late Seating, the movie review podcast that just went up this past Friday, where the new episode is where we review the classic horror movie The Wolfman, because it's October and it's Halloween and we review spooky movies and Halloween. And then coming up at the end of this week is the Ensign's Log, which is the Star Trek themed improv comedy podcast that we do together, and the Ensign's Log episode coming up on Friday. No pressure on us, not to build up any undue expectations, but it's our best episode ever. So, and you can listen to that at letmelistenpodcasts.com or on SoundCloud and stuff like that. You can just Google it and find it. But anyway, those are all the things and all the places where you can find me.
Okay. And with that, I have perpetually forgotten 2/3 of what you say every week, and it just flips out of my mind immediately afterwards. It's like, what, your heart matters, your mind matters, you matter?
Hey, we can go with that. No, it's okay. Your voice matters, your life matters, and you matter.
Okay, that is actually a much better
That's how I end. That's how I end all my.
It's almost like you're a writer or something.
Wow, yeah. You put some thought into that shit.
Well, bye.
Bye.
Hey.